Good afternoon, and thank you all for attending this lovely little webinar in relation to is your risk analysis aligned with your organisation. My name is Claire Harling. I am a regional assessor for NQA, and my background is to appoint industrial, so I was lucky enough to be in other areas before joining NQA. NQA is an amazing company to work for, but also from an auditing perspective, we have over 1,000 employees worldwide with absolutely an immense wealth of experience between us all. We've been operating as a certification body for 35 years, so since 1988. We've issued over 50,000 certificates globally, and with the majority of our clients or customers, I like the client, sounds nicer, have been with us for at least 10 years. And to be honest, every client that I've had the pleasure of working with has been amazing. I've learned so much from them as well. As I say, we've been operating in 90 countries. So just a little bit of background regarding NQA and what we do. We do various training courses. We do in-house training, so you can either come to us or we can go to you. We can do bespoke training. Again, it can either be done virtually or a specific client location within the UK. We are both IRCA and CQI approved training partners, so all of our training courses are approved, and as and when if we are lucky enough to audit you, our courses are relevant and also approved, so approved by UCAS. So when it comes to monitoring competence, not compliance, wrong area, it gives the auditor concerned confidence in the training that you've had. And so we do lots of virtual training, which means we're able to do the training course in the UK and be providing training to companies in India, China, Australia, America, South America, Europe, South Africa, all over the world. And we, as I say, we do have a huge number of courses for different standards. So we do the quality standard training on that, also environment, energy, becoming a bit of a thing now because of the route to net zero, health and safety, information security, fairly critical, food safety, immensely critical because we all want to know that everything that we eat and drink is safe. Medical devices, we want to know that when we're going to a hospital that everything is as it should be. Business continuity, again, with all the other sectors, it just sort of goes hand in hand. And if something goes wrong, we want to know that they've got a plan in place. Aerospace, we obviously want our planes to be able to fly. I recently came back from holiday and was quite pleased that my plane was able to fly me home, to be honest. But we also audit integrated management systems, and we also look at sustainability as well. So we've got a huge amount of training courses that we do. We do e-learning introductions, we do one-day introduction courses, two-day implementation courses, two-day internal auditor, and they are either an NQA certificate or an IRCA certificate, and the 5-day lead auditor, which is an NQA certificate and is also registered with IRCA, so that if you were if your company then changed certification bodies, your certificate would still be valid. So quite a good thing, really. So please, and I do appreciate that you may have a number of questions. So if we can sort of leave the questions towards the end, that would be fantastic, just so that it makes it easier. But if something is fairly important and you want to ask it, please do, and I will answer it at the most appropriate moment in time. So what is the definition of risk? According to the dictionary, risk implies future uncertainty about deviation from an unexpected outcome. And it measures the uncertainty that a person or a company is willing to take to realise a gain from an investment, a challenge, a project. So when we're looking at that sort of thing, we're looking at thinking, how do we as a company make sure that we can do what we need to do? There are many, many ways of looking at risk. From a personal perspective, it's do I buy a car? Do I get married? Do we have children? Etc. Some of the risks we face are ones that we don't really think about. We just react to. Situation changes, decisions are then made. So as an example, you go out looking for a car and you've thought, I'm going to buy picking a make and model of car out there. I'm not a car person, I will be brutally honest with you all, but I'm going to go and buy a 3-year-old Ford Cougar. So you go to the Ford garage because you're going to buy it from the main dealer because you feel that way confident that they'd have done all the inspections and you will get the car that you want. And the way they talk to you and the way they explain things to you, you end up taking the leap. You know what? I'm going to buy a brand new car. That's a risk. You've gone from knowing exactly what you wanted to changing what you want, and that's where the risk comes into play. We're also more aware of the environmental risks. For example, taking a dip in the sea after heavy rainfall. And we all use apps like Surfers Against Sewage just to check to see if the beach and the sea and the beach is clean. I mean, to be honest, I'm lucky enough I live on the south coast, but when it's been heavy rainfall, I may take a walk along the beach, but I do not go onto the beach because I check my Surfers Against Sewage app to see if there's been any discharges. And again, that's a risk that when we look at it, not only is it an environmental risk, it's also a health and safety risk. And it's also, as another example, if the car in front is burning oil, basically it's got smelly exhaust, how do we stay a reasonable distance behind the car? Do we turn off our air conditioning? Or do we take an alternative route with the potential risk of being late? So again, we react all the time to various different risks. And then from a health and safety perspective, we in the UK are given the opportunities at different ages to have health checks completed by local doctors, or if we know that either a close or extended family member may have an inherited health issue, e.g. eczema, heart disease, some cancers, we may take the doctors up on that because we want to understand the risk that we face. Or we can be like some people, put your head in the sand and think, yeah, I don't need to go to the doctors, I'm fine, there's nothing wrong with me. Business risk, however, is a combination of personal risk, if the company is privately owned, environmental risk from construction, noise, dust, complaints, etc., health risk, monitor employees' health, potential for various exposures, including noise, dust, but also potential accidents in the workplace. And in this webinar, we'll look at the type of risks that can impact a business and how, when you analyse that risk, do the risks that you've identified reflect the business sector you operate in? So it is quite difficult. Sometimes we have an idea, and then we don't always have an idea. So as I said earlier, we have different types of risks. You've got health risk, lifestyle, work-life balance, genetics. People inherit the BRCA gene for breast cancer, male or female. Heart disease, etc. And then you've got the environmental risk, again, spillages, discharges to air, land, water, etc. Personal risk, learning to drive. I mean, to be honest, I'm glad I passed my driving test when I did. Really wouldn't like to do the driving test now, because my viewpoint was when I learned to drive, if something went wrong with the car, I'd phone the AA or the RAC or green flag. I wouldn't know how to change a tyre. I still don't know how to change a tyre. I just phone the car recovery people. It's also the same with personal risk, is buying a car, buying a property, the bank loan, etc. With the business risk, it's company changing direction, its business is being sold, taken over, and also which then impacts the company's reputation. So it is one of those things when we start to look at it, oh yeah, it's not that bad, it's not that bad, we don't have to. These are just some lovely pictures of some sort of risks that we all face, really, be it either in the personal or in the workplace. So businesses face the risk of potential fire. We have fire risk assessments to hopefully counteract any potential fire that may happen. So as a company, you have a fire risk assessment. You look to see if the competent person that's done the assessment has raised any actions, and you react to those actions. So that's why we've got two different pictures of two different fires, because sometimes with a fire, and I use the crop picture, it is a case that when you're a business, you have to be aware of your surroundings, and if there are fields or agricultural areas or anything like that, and there's a fire, it could impact not so much how your business operates, but access to your business. I mean, a number of years ago when I was living in Essex, there was a huge fire in a field, and in this field somebody had been storing up, I think it was well over 1,000 tyres, lorry tyres, car tyres, etc. it caught fire. I'm not quite sure how. There was massive investigation, but the road that went past it, which is one of the main A roads, was closed for nearly a week because of the smoke coming across the road. So vehicles did have to make detours. Then you have your sat nav to hopefully make the correct detour, which doesn't impact your time on the road. And then you have things like thunderstorms, torrential rain, etc. You have floods. Floods can be a result of torrential rainfall, but also floods can be where a river has burst its banks. Or, as I found out to my cost last week, torrential downpour, the surface water drains in my road didn't like it, and my road was flooded. So I had fun and games getting home from the client that day. So that was fun, but it was a risk. I took the informed decision to park the car not near my house and walk up to my home because it was just easier than wading through 2 foot of water, because it wouldn't have been very nice. How do most people and companies see risk as being identified? We look at things such as risk assessments for tasks being completed, COSH assessments for the substance being used. With COSH is an awkward one because we think, oh, it's chemical, it's substances that are harmful to health, and we look at it from a human perspective. But what we should be looking at when we're looking at a COSH assessment is what the product is and how it's being used and how it can then affect the person using it or somebody else further down the line, depending on how the manufacturing process works. You've got environmental risk assessments for planning applications and also part of permitting requirements. Those risk assessments, they're not standard risk assessments. They're nothing like a health and safety risk assessment, but you have to look at it from an environmental perspective, and it can make a task harder. But being aware of the risk means that if you're putting in an application for planning, you have a planning company, you say to them, right, do we need to do an environmental impact assessment? Yes, we do. Okay, how do we do it? So you've addressed how do you do it. There's also the risk in relation to insurance policies. You have public liability, vehicle insurance, employee liability insurance. These are all risks. The insurance company takes the risk on you the owner, you the company. Maintenance programs, we have them in place so that we can analyse how often do we need this piece of equipment to operate? Do we need it to run 24/7, 52 weeks of the year? Or do we only want to run it 3 days a week, every other week? The maintenance program when putting the maintenance program in place, you assess the risk. And the same with calibration of equipment. You look at the equipment and think, how often do I need to calibrate it? Do I do an internal check once a week, just checking it against the standard, for example, with a pH meter? So you put the probe into some buffer solution, usually either pH 4, 7 and 9. It was many years ago. And if it's within the parameters of 0.2, you say, okay, 0.2, you say, yeah, fine, that's calibrated. But if it doesn't make the correct readings, do you send it away to be calibrated, or do you have a spare one that you can put into place to be used afterwards? Again, it's risk. It's how important is it to the business? Do we need to check what the pH is of that product that we're making? So this is a tiny little sidebar, and to add a little bit of lightness to the whole proceedings. A good number of years ago, long before I was born, and probably long before all of you were born, Rolls-Royce have been a company that have been in existence for an exceptionally long period of time. Rolls-Royce has a legend that their cars never break down, they just fail to proceed. And they have built their reputation on this. And it's quite interesting when you sort of do a bit of research, you think, and then you start thinking about what you see on the side of the road. And with Rolls-Royce, it's actually quite an interesting story. Now, the novelist Rudyard Kipling, he who wrote The Jungle Book and also the poem If, and quite a few other things, he was in the south of France, and whilst on holiday, his car failed to proceed. Basically, it had broken down. He contacted the Rolls-Royce Paris distributor to complain about it. And then the next morning, because he hadn't heard anything back, he inquired with the hotel manager to see if Rolls-Royce had contacted him whilst he was asleep or whatever. He said, because nothing's been done to the vehicle. And then the hotel manager said, well, actually, a team came from Rolls-Royce during the night, repaired the car and left before dawn so as not to disturb him. And when you see something like that, you think, okay. Now, I'm lucky enough to be able to say that many years ago, that Rolls-Royce that was owned by Rudyard Kipling is, the last time I heard, is currently in a garage in Leigh-on-Sea in Essex, owned by a gentleman by the name of Ted Overton, because he collected and he worked for Rolls-Royce many years ago. And the reason you've got on your screen now is the information regarding to the risk to Rolls-Royce's reputation. If a Rolls-Royce fails to proceed at the side of the road, a lorry is dispatched to collect the vehicle. You do not see the vehicle being transported away on the back of a low loader or on the back of a vehicle collection truck. It gets put onto the back of a proper lorry trailer that is either a curtain sider or a rigid container, and it is not seen to be transported away to be repaired. It's very, very rare that a Rolls-Royce is seen on the back of an RAC tow truck or an AA truck, because the majority of our Rolls-Royce owners will contact Rolls-Royce directly and they will come and sort the work out. So the reason they do that is to prevent manufacturer identification, but it also goes with the legend that their vehicles never break down, because nobody ever sees them on the back of a tow truck. So they do that to protect their reputation. And then, as I say, on here, as it says, during transportation, the vehicle is kept undercover to prevent manufacturer identification. And if it occurs at the owner's property, office, etc., then a team of mechanics are dispatched to complete the work. And then 9 times out of 10, a bill isn't issued because they never break down. They never fail to proceed. There's never an issue with them. But that is how Rolls-Royce have been able to maintain their reputation for those vehicles. And obviously paying the amount of money that those vehicles are actually worth is probably why they want to maintain that reputation. So what I've done with this webinar, and hopefully you'll be fine with this, is I've done a bit of a breakdown. I split it down into ISO 9000, ISO 14000, and then ISO 45001. Because the viewpoint was that it's being able to understand how the risks work to the company. So what we're looking at first is risk awareness and ISO 9000. So come on screen, move over, that's it, perfect. The information seen on the screen has been taken from ISO 9001 2015 clause 6.1 with actions, and it's basically it says that the company will take actions to address risks and opportunities, and they shall be proportionate to the potential impact on the conformity of products and services. Options to address risk can include avoiding the risk, taking the risk in order to pursue an opportunity, eliminating the risk source, changing the likelihood or the consequences, sharing the risk, or retaining the risk by informed decisions. Then you've got note 2, which is the opportunities that can occur as a result of the risk. So with a lot of companies, and particularly in the current climate, some businesses have been changing how they operate, the field that they work in. Do they expand their field? Do they look at new processes, new plants, etc.? All those decisions are risks. So what does this mean from a quality perspective? These can be business risks which indicate that the company hasn't anticipated the potential risk for a new product, a new site, etc. For example, healthy order book, but not enough employees or competent persons available to complete the work. This means passing the customer's deadlines with the potential for financial penalties, and also reputation damage to the company's reputation and also the image. Every company would love to have a healthy order book, but every company would also love to have the right number of competent employees. But it doesn't always work. So if it doesn't work, you've got and to be honest, the financial penalties, which will impact the company from a quality perspective, because if you lose clients, you lose orders, which means you then reduce the number of employees you have, you may reduce the time the site operates, etc. So there is that linkage there. Another risk, payment terms. Customers wanted to be paid 90 days from date of invoice. A real headache for the finance department of any company, especially when your supplier wants 30 days payment from the date the order was dispatched. It doesn't work. You've got 60 days where theoretically no money is coming in. So as a company, you have to say, are we happy to take that risk? Do we want that customer? Can we survive in business with having a customer like that? Or can we actually get our supplier to maybe wait 45 days from receipt of item versus 30 days? And then we have the shortage of competent persons. The result of this is possibly if the employees aren't competent or they're just not quite at the stage they should be, the standard of product may not meet the customer's specification. And I use as an example here, and it sounds really daft, machinists not stitching in a straight line or following the markings. And if you think about buying a pair of trousers, a skirt, a dress, if you look at the seams in these garments, you can actually see that the margin of error for getting the stitch wrong is quite tight. And then also you have things such as the shortage of the correct grade of raw materials, e.g. identifying and ordering the correct Pantone colour. I use that as an example because when and I use the phrase very loosely, when we go to decorate our houses, our homes, our offices, we go to B&Q, Homebase, Wix, wherever, and you have all those lovely colours on the wall. Yes, you have all the tins, but if you go to the paint mixing section, you have all the different shades of yellow, all the different shades of blue, green, red, etc. And you want to pick the right colour. And it's a risk because you pick the colour and you think, is it going to work? You go home, you dab it on the wall and think, yeah, that's not going to work. And at that point you think, okay, what do we do to mitigate this nice blue splodge that I've got on the wall? How many coats of white do I need to put over it to get the room back, get the colour back to where it should be? And again, that is your risk. But with those sort of risks, you face the resulting customer rejects, customer complaints, but also to a point, the customer not being able to return the product to you as well, or you as a company not being able to take the product back. Or if you do take the product back, you may not be able to send it back to the supplier. So again, you have that risk. Next slide. That's it. Those examples show where identifying the risks can enable the company to plan how to address the risks. So, for example, having a broad specification on a product. When you look at a bottle of water that you go and buy in the supermarket or from WH Smith's or wherever, the pHs on the bottles will say a range of 5.5 to 5.6, or some have, if you buy alkaline water because you're following the alkaline diet, you'll buy bottled water that's got a pH range of 8 to 9. What that means is the bottles of water that you purchase will be somewhere between pH 5.5 and 6.5, or 8 and 9. It's the same with when you buy fruit and veg. If you buy it loose, you know that it's going to have a weight, but it may not be the correct weight that you want. So that is your broad specification on the product. So we then look at risk analysis and 45001, which is the health and safety standard, which is probably a bit more interesting versus business risk and financial risk. So what we're looking at from occupational health and safety, which is the ISO 45001 standard, is the combination of the likelihood of an occurrence of a work-related hazardous event or events or exposures, severity of injury and ill health, which can be caused by an event or an exposure. ISO 45001 includes 6.1.2.2, bit of a mouthful there, folks, sorry about that, is the assessment of occupational health and safety risks and other risks to the occupational health and safety management system. And what it says is the organisation shall establish, implement and maintain processes to A, assess the risks from the identified hazards while taking into account the effectiveness of existing controls, and then also B, to determine and assess the other risks related to the establishment and implementation, operation and maintenance of the management system. And it's there that the organisation's methodologies and criteria for the assessment of the risk shall be defined with respect to their scope, their nature, and timing to ensure they're proactive more than reactive and are used in a systematic way. And what it also says is documented information shall be maintained and retained on the methodologies and criteria. What that means is, you and I, it's a risk assessment. We have a risk assessment on a process or an overarching one on site management, etc. And in that risk assessment, we detail what the potential risks are, and we keep a copy of that and we review it, be it annually, biannually, or even every 6 months, depending on how the company sees the risk. So what the ISO 45001 says with relation to risk is an effect of a deviation from the expected, be it either a positive impact or a negative impact. It's also the uncertainties, the state, even partial, of the deficiency of information relating to understanding or knowledge of an event, its consequences or likelihood. So it's knowing if something happens, what will happen afterwards. It's the process after the incident. So as an example, you have a fire, what do you then do next? Are you able to continue running the company, or do you need to shut down, regroup, determine a clean-up operation, or are you able, and the building is predominantly would be an office-based business, can you get a cleaning company in to clean it all up and to freshen the building up so you wouldn't realise there'd been a fire in the kitchen, using that as an example. So risk is often characterised by the reference to potential events, and that's detailed in the ISO guidance, and the consequences and the combination of those. And what it is basically the change in circumstances and the associated likelihood of occurrence. So that's why with risk registers, they have risk ratings. Something could happen. It may have the likelihood of happening once a week. It could have the likelihood of happening once a day. It could be something that may happen once every 6 months. It's working out that likelihood that it might occur and then determining is that a risk to the company or not. So what does this mean from a health and safety perspective? Health and safety risks can vary from what can be seen from the obvious, as in fire, flood, bad weather, of which there could be some level of prevention or reduction of impact, as in flood defences, fire extinguishers, fire training, bad weather, lightning rods. But also, as knowledge and awareness of products and processes have improved, the risks in some areas can be designed out. And then as a result of that, companies can then include, if they are unable to design out certain things, they can include health monitoring for employees that are exposed to products and processes that could impact their health. For example, the power industry, up until I think it was the late 1990s, I could be wrong. If you worked in a power station in the UK, you had the potential to be exposed to asbestos. If you were an employee of what was the CGB and then after privatisation became National Power and Power Gen, the employees were given documentation to keep to give to the doctors if there ever was a health issue, to say this person has been exposed to asbestos fibres during their working time between such and such date and such date. So it is one of those things that as a business, these companies, they knew the risks, they made sure their employees knew about it, and they also gave their employees information to provide to the medical service, the health service, if they had issues. But also monitoring of an employee's age, health, etc., in relation to succession planning. People are working longer now. The retirement age is increasing. Some companies have policies where everybody retires at 60. Some companies you retire at government retirement age. Some companies have a viewpoint, you don't have to retire, you can work as long as you want. But from a risk perspective, the company would have to make sure that their insurance company were happy to have people over a certain age working for them. There's some insurance companies from a business perspective will not, they charge a higher premium for companies that have employees over the age of 70, because the risk to them is greater versus the risk to someone who is 27 working in the office versus someone that's 70 working in the office. It's quite interesting. You can end up going down so many different little holes of information when you're looking at risk, and you can look and think, oh, we're only doing that, we're only doing that. But it doesn't always quite work like that. Then you've got risk analysis in relation to ISO 14001, which is the environment. And again, it's clause 6.1.2, which is the same in ISO 9000 and also ISO 45000. But they look at things slightly differently. So clause 6.1.2 provides some guidance for companies for looking at their risks, determining what their risks are. For example, within a defined scope with the environmental management system. It says that the organisation shall determine its environmental aspects of its activities, products and services, so it can control those and control it, and those that it can influence, and also their associated environmental impacts, considering a life cycle perspective. So in other words, what they're saying is you look at the impact that every process that you operate has on the environment. So, for example, you have gas heating in the office. So the impact on the environment is the emissions from the gas boiler, for the unburnt carbon dioxide, the potential for NOx emissions from the boiler because of the use of natural gas. And the impact is it's increasing the CO2 potential. Some of it's because the boiler doesn't burn effectively, it's not using up all the gas. So some gas that doesn't get burnt off is then emitted to the atmosphere. And then when determining environmental aspects, the organisation should take into account changes, including planning on new developments, new or modified activities, products and services, and also abnormal conditions, and attempt to, this is quite difficult, I will be honest, reasonably foreseeable emergency situations. For things like reasonably foreseeable emergency situations, you're looking at what's the potential for a fire? What's the potential for a breakdown? What's the potential? And it is what's the potential, because there's only so much you can foresee, which does become quite fun. And then as a result of that, the organisation should determine those aspects that have or can have a significant environmental impact. So it's also then known as a significant environmental aspects by using an established criteria. And then what it's saying is that the organisation will communicate these aspects amongst various levels and functions of the organisation as appropriate. So in other words, it's in meetings, it's having the conversations with the employees to say, when we do this project, this is what happens. When we do this project, this is what happens. It's making people aware of the different things that are happening as the process evolves. So where are we? Apologies, I've just lost my train of thought. So the organisation shall maintain documents of information of its environmental aspects and its associated environmental impacts, and the criteria used to determine its significant environmental aspects and what those significant environmental aspects are. And these aspects can result in risks and opportunities associated either with adverse environmental impacts, which are threats, and beneficial environmental impacts that are opportunities. And the way that we look at it from a company perspective is when the company determines the impact it's going to have, and predominantly an aspects register will have information on impact to air, impact to land, impact to water. So impact to water will be, do we have a trade effluent consent? Yes or no? If it's no, fantastic. We don't have to worry about what's going to water. We only have to worry about non-trade effluent, which is the waste from offices and welfare facilities. If it's emissions to land, you're looking at the waste generated by the processes by the company. Can we send all of it away to be recycled so that none of it ends up in landfill, so it's zero to landfill? Or are there processes where the waste produced can be recycled back into the manufacturing process? Can we reuse so that it doesn't actually become waste until it actually finally leaves the site? And then you have emissions to air. So you have boilers, you may have processes that produce various gases as a result of a chemical reaction. It's the monitoring of those emissions. It's having your boiler inspected once a year to say, yes, it's burning effectively, it's burning correctly, it's burning the correct mix of gas. And if it's a manufacturing process, are we using the right volumes of raw materials? Have we got the process set that it will produce the least amount of gaseous emissions? We look at it from that perspective. So what is detailed in ISO 14001? The significant environmental aspects can result in risks and opportunities associated with either adverse environmental impacts, which are threats, and beneficial environmental impacts, which are opportunities, and it's the effect of uncertainty. So what it then says is the effect is a deviation from the expected, and it can be either a positive or a negative. Uncertainty is a state, even partial or deficient, of information related to understanding or knowledge of an event, its consequence or likelihood. And then the risk can also be characterised by a reference to potential events and consequences, or a combination. And with things like that, you are looking at your environmental risk assessments. It could be that the processes that you operate on site come under various other regulations. They may come under the COMA regulations, which is control of major accidents and hazards. The result of the COMA, coming under the COMA regulations, if you are a top tier site, you have to have a site safety plan. That safety plan has to identify every potential risk, be it either from a health and safety perspective or an environmental perspective, that could impact the site, could impact the process, could impact the company. So, and some sites, some companies that have COMA sites, they have live drills, they have, how do I put this, extremely large folders of risk assessments detailing every potential risk and every potential impact of each risk. And it's actually quite a hefty document. So what does it mean from an environmental perspective? So you're looking at planning permissions for initial housing developments, industrial commercial warehousing, factories, planning permissions where amendments are needed, which will then require various changes to the assessments that have been produced. Again, with planning permissions, you've also got, and it sounds terribly naff, location, location, location. Public highways, motorways and A roads, access to roads, especially when near residential areas, the impact of the vehicles that you as a company operate. It's that ability that sometimes a company may have been in a particular area or particular part of the country for 20, 30, 40, maybe even 50 years. And when they were first in that area, there was nothing surrounding them. But over the pace of time, buildings have been erected, housing estates have been developed, and what was an area that didn't cause anybody any issues and had zero impact on the local residents, then has a huge impact on the residents. And then there's also things such as major infrastructure developments, and that's major roadworks, smart motorways, new river crossings. And when we look at those, when a business is looking at either relocating or starting up, they look at what infrastructure is about. Can we get our products out easily, particularly if we have to use vehicles? Is there a way of sending things by train? Are there ways? Is it road and road alone? If it's road, how close are we to a motorway? Some parts of the country, such as Dorset and Cornwall, don't actually have motorways. It's A roads and B roads. So you look at it and think, can we get the vehicles in? Can we get the vehicles out? Can we actually have the right size of vehicles transporting the correct volumes? Again, all risk, because if they don't work out, it's an impact on the business. And then you have permits to operate from the local authority, from the Environment Agency. So from a local authority perspective, if you are an eating company that is providing food, you have an eating area, you have various permits in place to allow that where inspections have taken place to ensure that you have your hygiene certificates. If you are certain size industries or certain processes, you may have a permit to operate from the local authority. So, and these documents are known as LAPPC, which is Local Authority Pollution Prevention and Control Permits. Or do you need an EPR permit, which comes under the Environmental Permitting Regulations from the Environment Agency? With both of these applications, you have to send in risk assessments to say the impact of your processes, your employees, the products you use, the processes you employ, the energy you use, the water you use, the waste you create. You have to provide risk assessments detailing all of that information. And then you have neighbours, both residential, and I put in brackets human because we do have to say that, and nature. And I use foxes, badgers, bats, etc. Because when planning applications go in, people want to know what the residents think. But you also have to think about the natural environment that surrounds the area. Badgers, yes, in some parts of the company have a bad reputation. Sorry, part of the company, part of the country, do apologise there, have a bad reputation. But other parts of the country, you have the Badgers Act that protects them, and the same with bats and foxes. And it can go, what you thought was a very small risk can end up becoming huge. Senior management, cracking. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. Members of the senior management team can range from managing directors, chief executive officers, operations directors, engineering directors, chief senior chemists, depending on the business sector, sales director, etc. And when a company is looking to change direction, invest in new processes, build a manufacturing plant, the risks must be determined, discussed, and if possible, designed out. Has the company studied the marketplace? Have they been approached by a customer asking for a slightly different product or to join the joint product for something new? Has the company used focus groups? It's one of those things where it's also understanding how the company interacts with their competitors. And just to be on a personal note, as an example, around the corner to where I currently live, there are 2 parades of shops. On the first parade, there's a set of 6 shops, 3 of them are coffee shops. And then on the second road, on the second part of the road, a bit further down, there's another 3 coffee shops. So when you look at the high street, the high street predominantly becomes a number of coffee shops. You have most high streets now, you have at least 1 Costa Coffee, 1 Starbucks, 1 Cafe Nero, 1 Pret. And then that's not including the coffee shops and the independent coffee shops and also supermarket cafes. You also have the same issue with charity shops. And I also say mainly for London, the American sweet shops. And the thing is with the company, in using focus groups, consumer groups, a company can determine if it's going to be a good financial risk. Is it going to be a bad financial risk? Is it going to be worth the company's time, energy and effort to look into that area? And if the management team can understand not just the financial risk for a building, for a business, but also the quality implications, the environmental impact and the safety impact on the risk, the company will be able to address the risk with potential and all suitable outcomes. So I'm just going to have a look to see if there's any questions. Okay. I don't know a huge, right, gentlemen, Sivu, I do apologise if I've not pronounced your name correctly. We have some information on risk management for 27001. We will send that to you if you use, hang on, I've moved, and I can't, oh, sorry. We have, if you email info@nqa.com, they will be able to help you with regards to that information. Let's go back to, oh dear, the mouse isn't working properly. Right, well, then now there was another couple of questions. It's a question that my colleague was able to deal with. John Christensen, yes, I know. Problems with 9001, it's more to do with, yes, there was a bit of, I tried to make it equally between 9014 and 45. It's just that my background is environmental, so I tend to have a bit more knowledge on environmental than 9000, so I apologise for that. Yes, the presentation will be shared with the attendees after the session, so that will be happening. And I do appreciate, John, again, apologies with the 9000. I did try to include as much as I could, but there was so much to look at and so much to work out what to put in. If I'd have done everything that I'd planned to do, we'd have been here until 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, and I don't think anybody would have wanted to do that. I know I wouldn't. Are there any other questions? I think that may be it. Thank you all ever so much for your time today. I really do appreciate it. Hopefully it has been of some use. Barbara will speak to the marketing plus training team, and we will let you know regarding that. We will have your details because you signed up to this. We will let you know if there is one in relation to medical devices, because obviously I don't deal with medical devices, so I know that the risk on that would have been quite something, and I'd say I don't have that experience, but there's probably something on that somewhere along the line, so we will email you with the details on that one. But no, thank you all ever so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. And hopefully I didn't speak too fast either, because I know I can do that. Thank you all ever so much. Oh, definitely with the FDA. Yes, completely understand that. Definitely understand that. Yes, but no, we will. Any questions or queries, if you email them to info@NQA, we will get back to you and we will give you all the information that we possibly have on it. And we will try, particularly with the medical devices, we will endeavour to put together a webinar for you for that one, which should actually be probably a heck of a lot more interesting than mine. And I'm being honest about that. But thank you all ever so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you.